Port Charles was burning with tension on December 4, and not just because winter finally settled over the harbor. Today's episode delivered a shocking twist no one saw coming, one that places an unsuspecting resident directly in the crosshairs of the increasingly dangerous Mr. Sidwell, a man whose quiet arrival in town has already begun to send tremors through the community. But the big headline: Sidwell finally made his move, and he chose Spoiler as his target. What happened was part mystery, part psychological warfare, and part classic Port Charles cliffhanger. Let's break down today's dizzying developments. A quiet morning, until it was. The episode opened with a deceptively calm atmosphere at the Metro Court. Ava, sipping a meticulously stirred martini well before noon, watched the room with the alertness of someone expecting trouble. And she wasn't wrong, because that's when Mr. Sidwell entered, sporting the kind of polite half-smile that could mean anything: charm, deception, or danger. Of course, only viewers knew that Sidwell had spent the last several days lurking at the edges of Port Charles society, quietly gathering information and forming a plan that was as sinister as it was calculated. And today, that plan snapped into motion. But Sidwell walked right past Ava. His target was someone far more vulnerable today. Spoiler cornered. Spoiler had already been struggling, emotionally, financially, or morally, depending on which storyline they've been caught in lately. Today's scene found them alone in the Metro Court hallway, rifling through their phone with the kind of frantic energy that promised trouble. That's when Sidwell stepped out of the elevator. The hallway went quiet. Even without music, viewers could practically hear the tension. Sidwell offered a smile. "Spoiler," he said lightly, "just the person I wanted to see." Spoiler froze, a reaction that told the audience there had been past encounters we'd only been given glimpses of. Sidwell wasted no time, pulling a sleek envelope from his coat. It wasn't thick, but it was heavy with implication. "What is this?" Spoiler asked. "Insurance," Sidwell replied. "Mine or yours, depending on how cooperative you're feeling today." Inside the envelope was a single photograph, grainy but unmistakable. Something that could ruin careers, reputations, or relationships. Something that had been buried months ago. How did you even get this?" Spoiler whispered. "That's not the question you should be asking," Sidwell said. "The question is how far you're willing to go to keep it quiet." And thus the blackmail began. The terms of the deal. Sidwell's conditions weren't money. They weren't favors. They weren't even information. They were worse. He wanted access. Access to files, access to conversations, access to places he should never be allowed. He wanted someone on the inside, someone who could move freely within the hospital, within Port Charles, within certain circles that had always been closed to him. "Why me?" Spoiler asked, voice trembling. "You care too much," Sidwell answered. "About your job, about your family, about your reputation. People like you are easy to control." It wasn't said cruelly. It was said simply, as though Sidwell were pointing out the color of the sky. The scene ended with Sidwell placing his hand on Spoiler's shoulder. "You give me what I need," he said, "and no one has to get hurt." Meanwhile at GH, suspicion grows. Back at General Hospital, the day was already spiraling. Brooklyn and Elizabeth were knee-deep in an administrative mess after a file discrepancy flagged a patient intake that didn't match the digital records. The two exchanged concerned looks. None of this felt accidental. "It's not just a clerical issue," Elizabeth insisted. "Something going on." What she didn't know, of course, was that Sidwell's plan already involved GH, and the disruption was only the beginning. Their conversation was cut short when Finn entered, visibly rattled. "Have either of you seen Spoiler today? I need to talk to them." The women exchanged glances. Neither had. Elizabeth frowned. "Why? What's going on?" Finn hesitated before admitting, "I think they're hiding something." The irony, of course, was brutal. The confrontation that almost happened. Later in the episode, Finn finally spotted Spoiler entering an empty exam room. He followed quickly, ready for a conversation he'd clearly been rehearsing in his head. But just as he reached the doorway, Spoiler was already on a call, whispering with unmistakable distress. "No, you don't understand," Spoiler said sharply. "You can't ask me to do that. Not there. Not with those people around." Finn froze just outside, hearing enough to know something was very wrong. But before he could step in, Sidwell appeared at the other end of the corridor. His expression was as smooth as marble. "Dr. Finn," he nodded politely. "Long day." Finn barely responded, his gaze locked on the exam room door, overwhelmed with the sense that Sidwell's sudden presence wasn't coincidence. And viewers were left screaming at their screens as Finn was interrupted by a page from the nurse's station, forcing him to leave before he could confront Spoiler. Sidwell tightens his grip. In the final act of the episode, Sidwell met Spoiler again, this time on the hospital rooftop, where half the show's most dramatic moments seemed destined to occur. The wind whipped sharply as Sidwell stepped into the light. "I need the first file by tomorrow morning," he said calmly. "This is wrong," Spoiler insisted. "You're going to get people hurt." Sidwell's expression never changed, but his voice grew colder. "The only person in danger here is you, if you don't do exactly as I say." He then tapped the pocket where the photograph now resided. "Port Charles has a long memory," he murmured, "and a short fuse." The ending that left viewers gasping. The episode closed on a gut punch. Spoiler, left alone on the rooftop after Sidwell disappeared into the stairwell, pulled out their phone. With shaking hands, they dialed a number. "It's me," they whispered. "I need help, and I need you to promise you'll keep this secret." The audience watched breathlessly as the person on the other end answered, but their identity wasn't revealed. Only a familiar voice saying, "I'll be right there." Cut to black, where it leaves Port Charles. Sidwell's blackmail marks a turning point, not only for Spoiler, but for anyone connected to the hospital, the Metro Court, or the labyrinth of secrets that bind Port Charles together. His influence is growing fast, and his motives remain dangerously unclear. Tomorrow's episode promises a confrontation Finn won't be able to walk away from, a discovery in the hospital records that may expose a larger conspiracy, and Spoiler making a choice that will alter their storyline, possibly forever. Whatever happens next, Sidwell has proven he isn't merely passing through Port Charles.